You are at a restaurant. This is not just any meal, it is a dinner you planned, with people you chose, in a place that reflects who you believe yourself to be. The table has that wood texture you like. The menu is the kind you appreciate. Even the wine was thought through. The conversation flows. You talk about things that matter to you. You laugh at the same jokes you have always laughed at. You disagree on a few points, the safe points, the points where disagreeing seems intelligent. And when you leave, when you feel the cold air of the street on your face, you have that rare feeling, tonight I was completely myself, and you believe it. Deeply, you did not perform. You did not pretend. You were genuine. You were authentic. But there is a question you do not ask yourself as you walk back home, a question that hangs in the air like the smoke from the restaurant still clinging to your clothes. How do you know? How do you know that what emerged at that dinner was you, and not a version of you carefully assembled for that context, that audience, that moment? That is the problem, and it is bigger than it seems. There is a silent obsession in our time. It does not go by that name, but you recognize it. It is the obsession with being genuine, with not being fake, with not betraying yourself, with not living a life that is not yours. People go to therapy to discover who they really are. They change careers in search of something that makes sense. They end relationships because the other person did not let them be themselves. They travel alone to find themselves, and it is not delusional. There is something real in that search. There is a real pain in feeling like a stranger inside your own life. The problem is not the pain. The problem is the remedy the culture has offered. The remedy is called authenticity, and it may be poisoning you in a way you cannot yet see. Think of a recent moment when you felt inauthentic. Maybe it was in a meeting where you agreed with something you did not believe, at a party where you faked enthusiasm you did not feel, in a conversation where you did not say what you truly thought. The feeling is specific. It is a kind of internal vertigo, a soft background noise that says, "This is not you." Now think about what you did after that. You probably promised yourself to be more authentic, more truthful, more you. And here begins the paradox this video will dissect. Because the promise of being more yourself presupposes that there is a fixed, coherent, stable you waiting to emerge. It presupposes that authenticity is a destination, that you simply need to remove the masks and there it will be, the genuine self, intact, waiting. Heidegger would disagree, and his disagreement will change the way you understand every choice you thought you made freely. The question is not whether you should be authentic. The question is the imperative to be authentic already, in itself, a form of inauthenticity? What if the search for the true self is the most sophisticated mechanism culture has found to keep you captured? Martin Heidegger published Being and Time in 1927. Philosophers spent decades trying to refute the book. They could not, because Heidegger was not doing theory. He was describing what happens to any human being who exists in time, who lives among others, who tries to be someone. And what he described about authenticity is not what you expect. For Heidegger, authenticity, he calls it Eigentlichkeit, which literally means ownness, is not a state. It is not an achievement. It is not something you reach when you finally stop caring what others think, when you drop everything and go live in a cabin, when you finally have the courage to say what you feel. Authenticity, for Heidegger, is a mode of existing, a stance toward one's own finitude, an active appropriation of one's own possibilities, knowing that those possibilities have limits, that time is scarce, that death is certain. And in authenticity, the opposite is not lying, it is not calculated performance. It is something far subtler and far more pervasive. It is the flight from the weight of being yourself, and that changes everything. Observe what happens when someone discovers a new philosophy of life, anyone at all: Stoicism, minimalism, ethical veganism, Zen Buddhism. There is a universal pattern. In the first few days, there is excitement, a sense of clarity. This is it. Now it makes sense. The person reads, absorbs, changes some habits, feels like they are becoming more themselves. Then something subtle happens. The person begins to perform the practitioner, begins correcting others, begins to feel a tacit superiority toward those who have not gotten there yet, The Stoicism became an identity. The minimalism became a curated aesthetic. The Buddhism became a social posture. The internal transformation, which was the point, was replaced by the external signaling that the transformation had occurred. Heidegger would call this falling into das Man, the one, the impersonal, that diffuse voice that says how things ought to be, how authentic people act, how the true self manifests. You did not escape the expectations of culture. You internalized the expectations of a different subculture, and you called that liberation. There is an entire industry built on the promise of helping you find out who you really are. Silent retreats, guided journaling, regression therapies, purpose courses, identity coaches. They all sell the same thing: access to the authentic self hiding beneath the layers of social conditioning. The invisible mechanism is that this industry needs your true self to always be inaccessible, a horizon that recedes as you advance. Because a customer who has arrived is no longer a customer. Authenticity has become a product, and you are its chronic consumer of yourself. There is a modern belief that what is spontaneous is authentic, that the unfiltered reaction, the immediate impulse, the uncensored speech reveal who you really are. And here the paradox turns cruel. The culture that demands authenticity also created the imperative of spontaneity. You cannot seem like you are trying. You cannot seem like you are performing authenticity, because then authenticity disappears. So, you have to perform spontaneity. You have to practice not practicing. You have to carefully construct the impression that you constructed nothing. Heidegger would not call that freedom. He would call it sophisticated servitude. There is a specific type of inauthenticity that is never recognized as such, the performance of the one who rejects performances, the individual who makes a point of saying they do not care what others think, and who needs others to know that, who is radically honest and uses that honesty as an instrument of social control, who has no filter and cultivates that filterlessness, a recognizable personal brand. The rejection of the mask became the most rigid mask of all, because this mask has a special characteristic. It cannot be removed without destroying the entire identity. You are not authentic. You are authentic dash according dash to dash script dash that dash others dash wrote dash for dash what dash authentic dash means. Now the deconstruction goes deeper. Think about the concept of finding yourself. That phrase presupposes that there is a hidden self waiting to be found, like a lost object, like a key under the couch. But Heidegger argues that the self is not an object. It is not something you find. It is something you constitute, continuously, with every choice, with every stance toward your own existence. There is no true self buried beneath social expectations, waiting to be rescued. What exists is a being that is always already in the world, always already shaped by the language it inherited, by the feelings it did not choose, by the possibilities that its era permits or forbids. This does not mean you are merely a product of context. It means that authenticity is not subtraction. It is not removing layers until a pure core remains. It is an active relationship with the possibilities that your existence offers. It is appropriating those possibilities knowing they are yours, that time is finite, that you are responsible for what you do with them. And here comes the hardest blow. Modern culture transformed that active relationship, demanding, solitary, without guarantees, into a search for comfort, into a script, into a series of steps that, if followed correctly, deliver the authentic self as a prize. It took the most difficult task of existence and sold it as a consumer product. The system is not consumer society versus the authentic individual. The system is more perverse than that. The system turned the very search for authenticity into a mechanism of conformity. You believe you are liberating yourself when you choose to be yourself, but the model of what it means to be yourself was pre-approved. It has a recognizable aesthetic. It has specific vocabulary. It has communities of belonging. It has right and wrong ways of manifesting. Classic inauthenticity was visibly following the herd, obeying explicit norms, repressing what you felt. Modern inauthenticity is more elegant, believing you left the herd when you merely changed herds. Believing your originality is genuine when it is only a variation, within a set of permitted variations. Heidegger calls the inauthentic mode of existence Verfallenheit, fallenness, not moral fallenness, ontological fallenness. It is the condition of being absorbed in the world, guided by what one does, thinks, feels, without even realizing there is an alternative. The alternative is not easy. It is not liberating in the way Instagram promises. The alternative is the confrontation with one's own finitude, with the anguish of being responsible for an existence that came without a manual, with the impossibility of delegating to any system, cultural, philosophical, therapeutic, the task of being you. That is not empowerment, it is weight. And it is precisely that weight that the modern promise of authenticity is trying to spare you from. Now you see the mechanism. Contemporary culture captured the concept of authenticity, which in Heidegger is a demanding, solitary, and unfinishable stance toward one's own existence, and transformed it into a manageable social imperative. Being authentic became an obligation, and like every obligation, it comes with evaluation criteria, with performance indicators, with communities of validation, spontaneous by obligation, free according to a script, original within a catalog of permitted originalities. The modern individual was not liberated by the culture of authenticity. He was placed inside a more sophisticated cage, a cage that looks like a garden from the inside. Think about how many decisions you made in the name of authenticity. The trip you took because you needed time for yourself. The relationship you ended because you were not being yourself. The change of direction that felt like courage. The difficult conversation you had because you were not going to betray what you felt. None of those decisions was necessarily wrong. But the question Heidegger raises is not whether the decision was right or wrong. The question is, from what horizon was it made? Did you make those decisions from a listening to yourself, to your finitude, to your real possibilities, to the weight of your own existence? Or did you make them from a cultural model of how an authentic person acts when being true to themselves? There is an enormous difference between the two, and it is nearly impossible to detect from the inside, because das Man, the Heideggerian impersonal, does not speak out loud, it does not give orders. It creates atmosphere, it creates what seems obvious, what goes without saying, what any reasonable and genuine person would do in that situation. You are not following instructions, you are breathing air that was placed there before you were born, and calling that air identity. Heidegger does not offer a way out, and I will not offer one either, because the point is not to replace the imperative of authenticity with another imperative, the imperative of Heideggerian lucidity, the imperative of always being in existential anguish, the imperative of never letting yourself be absorbed by the world. That would simply be trading one script for another. What Heidegger suggests, and here you need to read carefully, is that authenticity is not a destination, it is not a state you reach and maintain. It is a possibility that appears and disappears, a moment of clarity in the middle of the continuous fall. You will not be authentic once and for all. You will not find yourself and be done with it. What you can do, perhaps, without guaranteeing, is recognize when the weight of your own existence is being outsourced, when what you call yourself is actually an automatic response to what the context demands of an individual like you. But even that recognition can become a script. Even lucidity can become a performance of lucidity. And it is here that the question becomes bottomless. If the imperative to be authentic is already a form of inauthenticity, and if the awareness of that can also be captured and turned into identity, exactly where do you begin? Heidegger did not comfort anyone. That was not his objective. What he did was refuse easy comfort, refuse the promise that there is a true version of you waiting to emerge. If you only follow the right steps, read the right books, make the right courageous decisions, that refusal is uncomfortable, because it removes the ground from beneath your feet. But it is also honest, and it may be the only form of honesty available when the very concept of authenticity has been hijacked. You do not need to resolve this, you need to see it. If this video opened any crack in the glass, if something here felt true in a way you cannot name yet, then the work was done. Not your work, the work of observation, If you want to keep seeing what is not easy to see, subscribe to the Antidote channel, because what we do here is not offer answers. It is refuse the easy answers, and that, in itself, is already rare.